As lies have become truth so powerfully over the past few years, we have now arrived at a time in Western civilization that people think we should be celebrating women's narcissism in becoming voluntarily sterilized to avoid evil men forever, that J.R. Tolkien wrote the characters of orcs in The Lord of the Rings to represent Black and brown people, and that Donald Trump is destroying the architecture of the White House while they build presidential libraries that look like Doofenshmirtz Evil Incorporated. So we got a lot to unpack in the insanity of the world today, but I have one beautiful message to share with you. Take a deep breath. The world is going to be fine. It's come to my attention that a new study is making the rounds on social media this week about which men are most likely to cheat on their wives. And it's going about exactly as you would expect. I didn't even need to do this episode, to see the chart, to do any of the research to tell you that the only thriving relationships in American culture today are right-wing, religious-based monogamous marriages. I think that speaks for itself when you open your eyes and stick your head out the window and see anything going on in our culture today. But it turns out the data and the evidence and the statistics are supporting that conclusion too. This new chart is all over my Twitter. I'm going to throw it up for you guys today. And everyone is weighing in on this, that they've analyzed men who believe extramarital sex is right or wrong between 2010 and 2022. And over the span of these 12 years or so, the idea that extramarital sex is always wrong, aka cheating on your wife is always wrong, for married men aged 18 to 55 has remained virtually exactly the same for Republican men, 82% to 81%. Fascinating. Meanwhile, for Democrat married men between 2010 and 2022, the number of them who say extramarital sex is always wrong has decreased by more than 20 percentage points. In 2010, 76% of married Democrat men would say it is wrong to have sex with someone who is not your wife. But by 2022, literally like only half of them believe that these days. Insane, first and foremost. Yes, objectively, in a moral society, extramarital sex is always wrong. You don't need to be a Democrat or a Republican to think that. But I look at this graph and I see this all over my social media, and it is so obvious to me how we got here, because marriage and the inner workings of our most intimate relationships and the male-female dynamic, especially on the left, has been so distorted and warped and changed by our changing sense of subjective morality throughout my lifetime and throughout the last several decades in American culture, to the point that we have normalized, never get married. So I'd be interested actually to see the workings of how this study was conducted and how many people they could interview from, because surely there is a smaller marriage pool to pull from now than in 2010. So never get married, but also in marriage, just have an open marriage, because marriage is just a legal agreement anyway. Oh, and also at all points in your life, just sleep with anyone and everyone, because that is the only way to remotely be empowered. That is the perfect picture of a happy relationship that is presented to young people, largely dominated by left-wing discourse and values. And shocker, the left has controlled virtually every pillar of American culture throughout my lifetime, whether it be our academic institutions teaching us sex ed and the most basic information about relationships, to the literary publishing world of all of the books that we've been reading since we were little kids, including young adult novels, creating all of this fiction fantasy worldview for young people that sex is empowering, especially out of the marital Covenant or Hollywood and the infinite number of TV shows and movies that we've watched throughout our lifetime. And yet, Republican, right-wing, conservative, whatever word you want to attach to that, young men still believe marriage is a sacred institution, a sacred covenant. This graph was part of a larger study that was published by the Institute for Family Studies, and I loved the title of this, so we'll put this up for you guys as well, of this particular study. Which men cheat the least? Turns out, Republican husbands, especially what the Institute for Family Studies is calling the religious wife guys. And I love this term. I love religious wife guys because what a powerful counter juxtaposition we could create with this label to the alpha male red pill bros. The religious wife guys, it turns out, are the trad young men who are buying into this pendulum shift and swing in the culture war that's been dominated by the national conversation geared towards young men, especially in the political world and this juxtaposition between left and right. It is continuing as I'm seeing more and more of these studies pull up on my social media every week to be more and more obvious to me that the messaging geared towards young men is working. But it could not be more at odds with the messaging that is specifically being programmed to young women. And I wanted to spend some time unpacking that with you today because it is clear to me we have unbelievable wins scoreboard to look at for young men over the past decade in American culture because good men stood up and told the truth. But we have infinite work still yet to do when it comes to making those same cultural gains and a big enough impact for this generation of young women. We're facing a crisis of leadership, a vacuum of strong feminine voices to tell young women the truth that is going to change women's culture to the same level that we've seen with young men. For the last decade, young men have been told by powerful voices and strong male leaders that masculinity matters, that family is worth pursuing, that marriage gives them purpose, and that life has a far greater meaning when it is rooted in faith and a relationship with God. They have been told dramatically difficult things to hear, which I find interesting because everyone likes to say that we live in a kid gloves culture, that we live in a participation trophy generation, that we can't possibly risk offending anyone. But the few people who were willing to risk offending young men have made by far and away the biggest impact on this generation of young men than anyone else in culture. People like Charlie Kirk dedicated their entire career, their show, their speeches, their lives to telling young men the difficult things to hear, knowing that they would rather tell them something hard to hear at first that was going to create a life of purpose and meaning and value later on than risk never offending them in the first place. Charlie told young men that they needed to die to themselves in pursuit of a bigger purpose than themselves. And he meant that quite literally. I had never seen this clip of Charlie until today, actually, and I knew we had to pull it for the show because talk about giving someone a hard truth in pursuit of changing the world for the better. Listen to this.
There's a reason why the dress for the man is the same at a wedding and a funeral, because you're saying goodbye to your previous self. The woman is the icon, the symbol of beauty, almost always in all white, right? Ascendant. The man is usually in black and white, like he's attending somebody's death, because it is his death.
He doesn't laugh.
No, but think about it. It's the death of the bachelor mindset. It's the death of promiscuity. It's the death of the wandering eye. It's the death of immoral behavior. It's the death of texting girls casually. It's the death of I get to do what I want to do. It's the death of just going to the bar with friends. It's the death of acting like an infant. It's the death of playing video games till 1 a.m. And it's the birth.
Wow. God, I miss you, Charlie. We need a lot more of that. That wasn't even at a Turning Point USA event. There was no TPUSA branding in the background. That was just Charlie being Charlie, speaking the truth to people. And they laugh at first. People laugh at first because it's following the same trope that people told young men for generations. Don't get married. It'll literally be the death of you. Marriage is like prison. Marriage is like digging your own grave and then lying in it. That's why you had to have these raunchy bachelor parties. And every TV show from the 90s and the early 2000s was all about shitting on marriage for men, saying it's going to ruin your life. The old ball and chain. He says that line, marriage is the death of the young man. That's why you're dressed like a funeral. And everyone laughs. But he doesn't laugh. He stops and he says, wait, hear me out. It's the death of vice. It's the death of self. It's the death of my desires, my conveniences, my immediate wants to create something more beautiful, to serve my wife and my family, to become a better version of myself, to change another person, this person I've committed my life to. And that in turn will change the community and the world. And you can hear the cheers moments after people laughed at him because this resonated with people's souls. And Charlie's not the only one saying stuff like this. I hear this all the time from Matt Walsh, from Michael Knowles, from our whole Daily Wire crew, and from so many other men, Jordan Peterson, out there leading young men in strong masculinity. They have gone out of their way to tell people the hard truths that they knew would resonate with the human soul because they are based in the human design made in God's image that eventually would change the world for the better. So it is no surprise to me that men are leading, for lack of a better term, the crusade. You'll see what I mean there in a second. Back toward God, back toward marriage, back toward family. King Baldwin, let them cook. Go, young men. The last few weeks have truly been some of the busiest weeks of my entire life. And it is the worst feeling in the world to get to 8 or 9 p.m., look at my husband and say, should we just DoorDash pizza for dinner? No one wants to do that. And it is especially not Maha. But I am so grateful that this fall we have friends that are making it 100% easy to get a healthy home-cooked meal around our family dinner table. This fall, Good Ranchers just announced their Back to the Table challenge. And honestly, for our family, it has changed everything. Once a week, come hell or high water, we are making it happen. No phones, no work emails, just us connecting around our family dinner table over a real meal. Here is what makes it 100% possible. Good Ranchers delivers 100% American high-quality meat right to our front door. Everything comes pre-proportioned and triple trimmed, so even on my craziest days, I can have dinner ready in minutes instead of spending an hour prepping or resorting to takeout or fast food or DoorDash at the end of a very busy day. And get this, Good Ranchers is giving away free holiday hams. You heard that right. Free holiday hams. By the way, Thanksgiving is like one of my favorite meals of the whole year. I know that might be a really hot take. Some people hate Thanksgiving. I love it. And I love holiday hams and the holidays, and especially when they come from Good Ranchers. You can get one for free every week when you join their Back to the Table challenge. All you have to do is share a photo of your family's one night a week family dinner on your Instagram stories, hashtag Back to the Table, and tag at Good Ranchers. The family dinner table is where I had some of the most important conversations with my family growing up that shaped my most deeply held values, and where we made some of our favorite memories with our cousins, our aunts and uncles, us as siblings, and with our mom and dad. And now that I have a beautiful baby girl and an amazing husband of my own, it is my favorite place for our family to gather to build those special memories one day at a time here with my new family as well. And we're so grateful that Good Ranchers is helping us to make that happen every single week. You can visit goodranchers.com and use my code Isabel for $40 off plus free meat for life. For life, people, when you subscribe. That is ISABEL for $40 off and free meat for life at goodranchers.com. Let's all get back to the table. Men are crusading for our culture in the pursuit of what is good and true and beautiful. And just this week, Pew Research, for example, is having to admit that religion is gaining substantial influence in our culture as a result of this. They shared this graphic just recently with Pew Research that between 2024 and 2025, there is a sharp rise in the share of young Americans, they say all Americans, who say religion is gaining influence. Look at the end of that graph in 1 year, from 2024 to 2025. The number of Americans who say religion is losing influence dropped dramatically, whereas the number of people saying religion is gaining influence shot up in a corresponding upward trajectory. And when they parsed out all of this data a little bit further, they found that young people, shocker, are the most likely to say that they are impacted by a positive view of religion. They say 31% of US adults say religion is gaining influence in American life. Ignore all of the different categories and skip all the way down to almost the very bottom. Look at the age demographic, age 18 to 29, more than any other age group in America by leaps and bounds, increased 18 points. Age 18 to 29 increased 18 points, leaps and bounds over any other generation to say religion is gaining influence in American life and has a positive impact on my life. This is because strong men told strong men that religion matters. And those religious men are committing themselves to pursuits larger than themselves. We all remember this graph that went viral the last couple of weeks about the political priorities of young men in a new Decision Desk poll from NBC News, that Gen Z men who voted for Trump, which, by the way, just to remind you, is the vast majority of young Gen Z men, rank having children as the number one political priority, number one personal definition of success in their lives. Being married was number 4. 34% of young men who voted for Trump said having children is the most important personal definition of success in their lives. Of course, on the other side of that, women who voted for Harris, which sadly is the slight majority of young women, said being married and having children are by far and away their lowest pursuits on the totem pole for their personal definition of success. This, to me, is so obvious of how powerful the narrative surrounding young men and masculinity and surrounding young women and femininity are. These narratives, this programming, this indoctrination, for good or for bad, is powerful. And it changes people's individual behavior, their priorities, the decisions that they make, the pursuits that they eventually endeavor in their life, which in turn changes culture at large. Because for every Charlie Kirk telling young men that they need to die to themselves, which is true objectively, but wildly countercultural to everything men have been told for the last several decades in American culture, everything programmed to young women is oriented the exact opposite way, which frankly is why we're miserable and in an actual crisis of strong female leadership. I can't tell you how often I see tweets from women like this one about how horrible the dating experience is for young women. This went viral, has 13 million views from just a few days ago. The dating pool for young women is literally porn addicts, sensitive guys you have to perform constant emotional labor for, narcissistic, if not sociopathic, gym bros, emotionally distant manipulators, and performative woke men who still treat women like. I don't know where you guys are looking for young men, but the vast majority of young men under the age of 29, like the majority of Gen Z men, are conservative, are pursuing God, rank having children as a number one priority in their life, want to get married and stay married, and say cheating on their spouse is wrong. So I don't know what young women are being told, or if they genuinely just have this complete divorce from reality based on the media that they're consuming. Probably is the case. But that is quite literally not the dating pool for young women. Yet we believe it because every influencer, every TV show, every movie, every headline, every legacy media outlet is constantly screaming at us that men are the enemy, that men are something to hate, or at the very least have disdain for. In July, the New York Times ran a really fascinating piece called The Trouble with Wanting Men, with this adorable hand-drawn cartoon of this woman who's like so disdained by men, so over men, so incapable of ever talking to a man again. And in this like 20-page expose in the opinion section of the magazine, this woman writes about how horrible it is in America today for heterosexual women who are attracted to men. Just hear this. She calls this problem heterofatalism. Heterofatalism. Lovely. That basically, I can't do anything about the fact that I'm attracted to a man because that's just how I was born. But God, I wish I could, because it is killing me inside to have to deal with men any other second of my life. Of course, this woman was married. She lives in New York City. Met her husband through the dating scene in New York City, decided early on in her marriage they wanted to have an open relationship, fell in love with another man while she was married to her husband, now is divorced. Shocking how that tends to happen when you violate the sacred covenant of a marriage, and now is frustrated in the New York City dating scene because she's meeting all of these men, but none of them are fulfilling to her. In vegan restaurants, specifically, she says. This has caused her to coin this term heterofatalism, saying that, it's just so horrible for all women out here because I can't possibly deal with speaking to another man ever again in my life. It must be men, right? She writes, men are what is rotten in the state of straightness, and why we shouldn't have why shouldn't we have an all-inclusive byword for our various pessimisms about them? Domestic pessimism. They still do less of the housework and childcare than women. Partner violence pessimism. Femicide is still gruesomely routine. Erotic pessimism. The female anatomy and its properties still elude many of the men in our lives. And the petulantly proud masculinist subcultures that have arisen, at least in part, as reactions to these pessimisms, keep coughing up new reasons to fear, rage against, and complain about men. God, women are insufferable sometimes. I just have to say that. Ladies, just be happy. I cannot for the life of me understand how it became so easy for our hyper-feminist culture to program women into thinking men, I want to read this again for you, men are what is rotten in the state of being straight in our culture today. Tough love moment for women in America. Men are doing all of the look in the mirror, soul searching, hard work of changing themselves from the inside out on behalf of women in our culture today. Men are dying to self. Men are hitting their knees in church on Sunday. Men are saying, I don't want to just sleep around. I want to get married. Men are saying, even if it's a financial struggle for me, I want to have children. I want to leave a legacy that's bigger than myself. Maybe there's something broken with our political system. So men are doing something to change it and voting differently than young people have ever been expected to in the past. If women want any semblance of the same optimism and hope and pursuit of purpose bigger than self that young men are experiencing today, we have desperately got to do the same thing. And we need more women in media who are willing to say the hard truth, who are willing to look in the mirror and encourage other young women to do the same thing and say, something is very, very broken with the messaging that we are giving to our sisters, to our best friends, to our daughters. We're calling that empowering, but we're miserable. We're miserable to the point that we feel the need to come up with new reasons, according to this New York Times article, to fear, rage against, and complain about men. Call me crazy. What if men aren't the problem? Sometimes they can be. And I'm not going to deny that there are horrible, legitimate, actual misogynistic behaviors out there. Of course there are. We talk about the alpha male red pill bro community and how there's nothing conservative or pro-woman or pro-man about it here on the show all the time. But what if men and masculinity at large is not the problem? It's the solution. Because we've tried decades of telling young women men are the enemy, and we're not any happier for it. We're not any more fulfilled for it. We're not any more satisfied for it. We keep coming up, I'm going to keep reading this line until the cows come home, coming up with new reasons to fear, rage against, and complain about men. And if you want to see the ultimate manifestation of what that looks like eventually, it's this video of this young woman who has decided the only way to celebrate her womanhood is to sterilize herself voluntarily and celebrate about it all alone.
Tomorrow, I'm getting permanently sterilized by having my fallopian tubes removed, so I decided to throw a little celebration for that and to celebrate the fact I've made the choice to not have kids. Women tend to only be celebrated when they get engaged, get married, or have a baby, and it's rare to see them celebrated as individuals for their accomplishments outside of the family. So it was really important to me to make sure that I dedicated time and space to celebrate myself and this life-changing decision that I'm making, and I'm so excited about it.
Women only really get celebrated when they get married or they get engaged or they have kids. Yeah, because those are meaningful milestones in one's life. No one ever should be celebrating hyper narcissism. So, homework for today, go watch that Charlie Kirk clip 25,000 times. Rewind this episode and rewatch that clip 25,000 times because it is not just for young men. Look in the mirror, ladies, and let's maybe acknowledge that men are not the problem. Genuinely, some of these stories that we're covering today are just truly shocking. But what's also shocking to me is that more people have not heard of YAF's National Journalism Center. There is not a more consequential or important pipeline from college into conservative media than NJC. They boast a 12-week internship training program that is fully paid and gives you access to the best reporters and personalities in the business. They also stick you right inside of a working newsroom in your very first week. If you want to be at the center of the nation's biggest political stories, NJC is the fastest way to do it. We have had several reporters right here at the Daily Wire who actually launched their careers at NJC, and they were able to launch their careers immediately after this incredible program. Our NJC alumni have covered and pursued stories relentlessly, like taking pictures from a helicopter to expose a dodgy Texas community development project that was marketed exclusively to illegal immigrants. That reporting was actually featured on Ben Shapiro's podcast, Fox News, and a whole host of other prominent media outlets. This reporting from our Daily Wire NJC alum has created real, tangible change in the world and put concrete wins on the board for all American patriots. It all traces back to NJC's Internship Journalism Bootcamp, which covers everything you need to break into conservative media, whether you're interested in podcasting like we do around here, video production, print reporting, or independent journalism of any kind. More importantly, if you are just tired of the fake news liberal media and you want to win, get off the sidelines and get into the game. Submit your application to the National Journalism Center today. There has been a growing consensus on the political right over the past several years working in the conservative movement that college is a scam. And I have not been the poster child of the American right. I'll just be completely honest and transparent with you guys. I got 2 degrees in biomedical sciences, including from one of those notorious elitist institutions here on the East Coast at Georgetown University. I'm currently working on my 3rd degree, another master's in theology from the University of Notre Dame. So as leaders on the political right have rightfully been saying that college is a scam, I definitely stick out like a sore thumb. But the scam allegations are getting harder and harder and harder to deny with some of these university courses. I gotta tell you, it has come to my attention that this semester at one UK university, there is a new course being offered about decolonizing Tolkien and all of the literature that he dedicated his life to writing. In case you live under a rock, we're talking about The Lord of the Rings. And this headline was published in The Telegraph this month about this course. It seems that The Lord of the Rings, at least according to this one college course that we're going to unpack here together for a second, demonizes people of color. I want to leave this up for you while we talk about this for a moment, because this is, how do you even respond to that? This is at the University of Nottingham in a history course called Decolonizing Tolkien. Oh, sorry. Let me put this back up for you because I do want to leave that headline up for you while we talk about this. The visual is just too important. Decolonizing Tolkien, that says that orcs, believe it or not, and other dark-skinned characters in the trilogy are victims of ethnic chauvinism invented by J.R.R. Tolkien on the quest to present white people as good and fictional, non-human characters, evil orcs, as the substitute for people of color, apparently. In the module's core text, The Telegraph writes, Dr. Onyeka, who is the teacher of this, writes that maligned peoples, include Easterlings, Southrons, and men from Harad. The trilogy also features the dark-skinned orcs, evil creatures that do the bidding of Sauron, known as the Dark Lord, who clearly represents the leadership of people of color. He also writes that Tolkien's treatment of the fictional races shares in a tradition of anti-African antipathy, in which people from Africa are painted as the natural enemy of the white man, while the Eastern races in the fictional realm of Middle-earth are depicted as evil, white, fairer-skinned people of the West. They're shown as virtuous. I can take this down for you. How do you even begin to rationalize this crap? What are we doing as a society looking at a fictional species that is a non-human species and desperately trying to invent and create more racism in society so that we can feel good about ourselves when we deconstruct that racism, that you look at an orc and immediately your brain thinks person of color. At a university, at a prestigious university in the United Kingdom. If it's been a minute since you've read or watched The Lord of the Rings, I have some photos of orcs for you here. I'll put them up for you on the screen today. I'm sorry, but if you look at an orc and your brain thinks black person, maybe you are the racist. Maybe Tolkien was not the maybe you are the racist. I have one more to show you. Again, if you are looking at an orc and your brain thinks black person, maybe you're the problem. Tolkien is not the only author that this professor is dedicating his entire career to attacking. And by the way, just that in and of itself is so messed up to me because J.R.R. Tolkien is one of, if not the greatest authors in the history of humanity. Like truly, The Lord of the Rings is one of, if not the best example of the pursuit of what is good and true and beautiful. That used to be objectively renowned. throughout all of society. The Lord of the Rings is one of the most beloved pieces of literature ever in human existence. But like Tolkien, and by the way, The Lord of the Rings is inherently a Catholic work. He talks about this regularly in his writings and regularly gave interviews about how this was supposed to be a religious allegory and leading people toward the pursuit of God. Like Tolkien, his best friend, C.S. Lewis, did exactly the same thing with his literature, including his works of fiction like the Chronicles of Narnia. This module, taught by this professor at the University of Nottingham, is also examining, shocker, racial issues in The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe. They say that they are exhibiting Oriental stereotypes because orange-colored turbans are worn by people with long beards who are the bad guys in this series. This is so ridiculously insane. And because the 4 children are white Anglo-Saxon English children, they're the good guys, so it's inherently racist against Asian people, I guess, in a completely fictional world. No. I don't find it coincidental, though, that a UK university is doing everything they can to attack C.S. Lewis and J.R.R. Tolkien, the most effective, powerful, and beloved Christian authors in modern history, maybe ever in human history, as the UK is watching the symbolic and literal death of Christianity inside of its own borders at the institutional level. And I say that because there is a true revival of legitimate Christianity happening from the people in the UK. But the Church of England, as we talked about on the show last week, is literally appointing female heads of the church. They are destroying cathedrals with graffiti that's mocking God, saying that this is how we bring new people in. This is how we say that we're not offensive and we let people know that it's okay to coexist, while they simultaneously destroy the most powerful, effective stories that are allegories for the Christian story, for the Jesus story, calling them inherently racist. I don't know who needs to hear this today. These people are deranged, okay? These people have let the rot of leftist fascism, literally, well, they call us the fascists, destroy their capacity for critical thinking so much that they are looking at an orc. Let's put this tweet up one more time for you because I can't believe this. The tweet matters. The tweet matters. They are looking at an orc in The Lord of the Rings, and they genuinely believe this is representative of people of color. Lord of the Rings demonizes people of color. Again, Professor so-and-so, anyone taking this class, anyone remotely thinking that you're on the right side of history for demonizing J.R. Tolkien and C.S. Lewis, if you are looking at an orc and you are thinking black person, you are the racist. And we will ride for Narnia at dawn. Covering some of this stuff this week, it is apparent to me that people are not well in the head, but we also are not well in our bodies quite too often because we're always pursuing the latest TikTok trend or taking some magic wellness greens powder and thinking that is a good substitute for taking care of our physical health. Lately, I've been asking myself, why are we just trusting these one-size-fits-all solutions with our health? Especially as a new mom, I can't just afford to randomly guess what my body needs to thrive anymore, which is exactly why I partnered with Jevity here on the show. They are doing something radically different. Actual science, which still exists. I know, it's a shock to us all. Through at-home blood work, they show you exactly what your body needs. Now, no more just throwing random money at supplements, just hoping that something works or believing that somebody else's body is going to work the exact same way that yours does. I am also breastfeeding my daughter still by the grace of God 6 months into my journey as a mom. And I have to be really, really careful about what supplements I'm taking to make sure that they are safe and healthy to continue passing on to my daughter. So here's what really sold me on Jevity. They create personalized supplement packs based on your specific blood work and what's going on in your life, not what some random influencer is selling you this week. Their AI analyzes your results, Then real wellness experts review everything, and you get a blueprint that is actually tailored to your specific body. We're fighting for truth in politics. We're fighting for truth in our faith. We're fighting for truth in our dating lives and the media here on the show. It is far, far beyond time that we demand it for our health too. If you are ready to stop guessing and to start knowing exactly what your body needs to thrive, you can head to gojevity.com/Isabel Brown or visit the link in the show notes on today's episode to learn more and get an exclusive discount. Choose Jevity because your health deserves so much better than whatever's just randomly trending on social media. There's a lot of other angry people on the internet here in Washington, D.C. this week because, in case you missed it, President Trump is doing some renovations to the White House down the street from here, and people are big mad. This picture is posted all over social media this week of some demolition that is taking place at the East Wing side of the White House. By the way, in case you're confused or you don't know the layout of the White House or where this photo is depicting the East Wing of the White House. This is not the West Wing where the president works. This is where the First Lady's offices are. And it is mostly like office space, pretty much. That's it. All the pictures that you see of the Christmas trees and all that stuff, that is in the main part of the White House where you see that half circular window on the main level. So most of this is just office space that accommodates for the First Lady's staff. This picture, though, is viral all over social media, and people are saying that Donald Trump is destroying American history. Donald Trump is destroying the White House. He's destroying our most sacred spaces as Americans, and he's doing it all to make himself look good. It's not that simple. Shocker. I know. And leave it to me, the White House girl, the big White House aficionado, to tell you to take a deep breath and calm down because everything is going to be fine. But that's not stopping the left from freaking out, breathing in a bag, and trying to convince the whole world that it's like the dog sitting in the house on fire, level DEFCON 1, watching any sort of construction happen at the White House whatsoever. Gavin Newsom took to his Twitter account, as he has been a bit too frequently these days as of late, trying to be Donald Trump. And they say imitation is the highest form of flattery, saying a bunch of very colorful things about the White House construction, showing this very clearly manipulative photo. Donald Trump doesn't want you to see this picture. He's literally destroying the White House. Gavin. I know it must be hard to see out of the lizard eyes as leader of the lizard people with enough of a vantage point to realize this is not destroying the White House. This is minimal renovation to the East Wing, which is just one tiny part of the White House complex. But let's just rewind for a second throughout history and remind ourselves that the White House has been under construction in some capacity literally since it was built, either out of necessity because the foundation was falling apart, or it burned down to the ground after the British decided to light the whole thing on fire, or just needing necessary updates at different points throughout history. Let's look at this photo from 1950 of the President Truman renovation. Wow, quite the process there, quite the construction. You didn't see anyone say back then that they were destroying the White House. Seizing, unable to process this information. And it looks a whole lot more dramatic when you look at the interior renovation of the White House in 1950 under President Truman. They're destroying the White House. No, they weren't. They were rebuilding the crumbling foundation because it was literally about to fall apart and become uninhabitable by the President of the United States. But in case you need the reminder, basically every single president at different points of history has put their own spin on the White House. This is a normal part of American history. All of them changed the interior design of the Oval Office to fit their particular aesthetic and their vibe because they work in there. But the White House complex at large has been changed numerous times to accommodate either for personal preference of the president or for necessary updates to the structure with where we're at in American history. People have been tweeting lists of changes to the White House at different points throughout different presidencies, and throughout American history. And this was a good reminder, even for history, White House aficionados like me, to know that every president has left their stamp. So will Donald Trump, and life will go on. The world will keep spinning, and the White House will keep being the White House. By the way, the West Wing, like the most iconic part of the White House, the Oval Office where the president works, that entire wing of the building didn't even exist until the GOAT, my favorite guy, they don't make presidents like this anymore, Teddy Roosevelt, built the West Wing because his 6 children were insanely rambunctious and constantly running around the office rooms in the main White House, distracting the staff and the president, and they needed a space for the executive staff to go work away from the president's family. Taft later made the executive office oval-shaped and created the Oval Office. The East Wing didn't remotely exist until FDR built it as the home of the First Lady's offices and other White House staff. And he built an indoor pool for himself, presumably out of therapy necessity for living with polio and living in a wheelchair. That room is no longer a pool. It is now called the press pool for a reason, because they built the White House press briefing room over the pool. That's where we even get the term press pool. Truman gutted the entire interior of the White House and basically rebuilt it from the ground up, as we showed you those pictures just a few moments ago. Richard Nixon added a bowling alley because he was such a lover of bowling, a man after my own heart in that regard. President Obama built the White House basketball court, did not exist until Obama was there. And Donald Trump is building a ballroom because there is quite literally no venue space big enough on the White House complex to accommodate for ceremonies, for bill signings, for executive order signings, for balls, for events geared toward the American people that can accommodate the number of people that need to be there. I know this sounds unbelievably privileged, so I recognize the incredible, insane opportunity I have to regularly be at the White House in this last year. It is something I never take for granted, and I thank God for every single day because it is very cool. But I've been to 6 or 7 of these big events happening at the White House with several hundred people in attendance this year in 2025. And whether it was Women's History Month or the End Men and Women's Sports Executive Order signing or Charlie's Presidential Medal of Freedom ceremony or any of the other things that I have been at, every single time, finding a venue big enough to accommodate with the space needed for several hundred people in attendance is a disaster. It is standing room only. I remember being 8.5 months pregnant at Women's History Month at the White House, wearing heels because that's what you do at the White House. You wear high heels. And I had my computer and I was going to and from work and doing all of that, standing like sardines packed in the East Room, which is the big, beautiful room that you see the portrait of George Washington going like this, that we make all of the good memes from. And we were literally packed in there for 3+ hours, just standing there shoulder to shoulder. It was very hard to leave and go to the bathroom. There were no room for seats for enough of these people. This has been a desperate need of the White House for a very long time. And Donald Trump does not own, the Trump organization does not own the Trump Hotel just down the street where most of these venues were used in the last Trump administration in Trump 45. That hotel was sold to the Waldorf Astoria, so they don't own that venue space anymore. And regardless of who is the president, we've needed this for a very, very, very long time. There's that aerial photo I want to show you guys too of just the White House complex, because I think there is this general idea that they're going to ruin the aesthetic, the vibe of the White House in creating a ballroom that can be used by any president throughout history to appropriately have these events and have these venues. When you look at the White House, it looks about this big, okay? And what you're seeing is the thing in the middle, the White House residence. By the way, the actual residence is only the 2nd floor. The whole 1st floor of that center area is the red room and the green room and the blue room and the East room and the state dining room. It's where all of the Christmas decorations are set up during Christmas time. And you see these beautiful videos of Melania walking through gigantic rooms full of Christmas trees. That's in the residence portion of the White House. The president's staff works in the West Wing, but actually that's only about 10% of his staff that works in there. The gray building that's off further from the West Wing, the Eisenhower Executive Office building, is where like 99% of the White House actually works. The First Lady's staff and most of the household staff, like the cooks, the florist, all of those people work in the East Wing. And the only images that are being shared, well, I'll put Gavin Newsom's tweet back up here for you guys in a second. The only images that are being shared about the destruction of the White House is that little yellow encircled spot at the very edge of the East Wing. So it is disgustingly misleading and honestly just pathetic to try to rile up the American people and create controversy out of nothing. When you see this picture, Donald Trump doesn't want you to see this picture. He's literally destroying the White House. When I'll go back to the aerial one for you, all this is this yellow encircled part. That's where the demolition is currently being carried out. Please, for the love of all that is good, do not believe everything that you see on social media. And it's going to be beautiful, by the way. This isn't tacky. And I get it. Some people don't care for Donald Trump's aesthetic of all the gold and the really ornate stuff. I understand that. I empathize with that. I 100% understand where you're coming from. But it's not like they're turning this into the Palace of Versailles or like gold gilded halls that look like something out of eras gone by in feudal Europe, okay? The architect that they hired to build this ballroom is an incredibly successful, unbelievably artistic architect who is rendering the Trump ballroom. I think I have an image to show of you guys, a couple images actually. These are what the renderings are looking like of what this ballroom on the inside is going to look like. This guy builds cathedrals all over the United States of America. His architectural style is incredibly beautiful, is literally designed at creating sacred spaces. So of course he will honor the original integrity of the White House. And I'm incredibly excited to see what this looks like. But I am just tired, frankly, of being lectured to about the destruction of beauty and the destruction of our history and how Donald Trump is destroying American standards of excellence at the White House from people who are building presidential libraries that are giving Doofenshmirtz Evil Incorporated. Okay? In case you need the reminder, this is President Obama's new library in Chicago. If you are not actively laughing at this, Gavin Newsom and company, at the most disgusting, weird, shapeless, ugly, brutalist architecture that is completely contradictory to American excellence and the presidency, I don't want to hear one peep from you people out of any structural changes happening at the White House. Enough. What a crazy time we live in, and that's exactly why we have the Isabel Brown Show to replace the insanity with some good old-fashioned truth. If you guys haven't already subscribed to the channel to make sure you catch every single episode, please help us out as we continue to grow our amazing community of truth seekers. And regardless of where you watch or listen, if you guys can help us out and go to your favorite podcast platform today, either Spotify, Apple Podcasts, wherever you have podcasts available to you, and leave a 5-star review and download our podcast there, that would be so, so helpful as we continue to transform the world with truth for the better. Love you guys so much. See you tomorrow back on the Isabel Brown Show.